Welcome back to the Daily Flip podcast. I'm your host, Alex, and today we're flipping through a story about Susie Wiles and her comments to Vanity Fair. The write-up we actually have is from the New York Times, and it shows an interesting conversation that happened over the course of 11 interviews, multiple months, basically the entire first year, it seems like, of the Trump administration, and it's thrown Washington for a loop. But with that, let's jump into our daily debate. Do you think Susie Wiles is angling for anything after the Trump presidency? I think that was my initial gut take, and I want to know what you have to say. Is she trying to line up a position afterwards or distance herself from a Trump presidency so that she can eventually make it out and serve somebody else as an amazing campaigner? I don't know. Throw your comments down in the comment section. Love to hear what you have to say. With that, let's actually get to the article. Headline reads, Takeaways from Susie Wiles' Candid Interviews Describing a Trump World. And like I said, this happened over a long period of time, but all of the successive quotes that they took out of all of the interviews paint a picture of someone who doesn't necessarily feel comfortable in the Trump White House. Though, I will say, my initial reaction was exactly what I described at the beginning. She is angling. She's trying to make sure that she's not caught up in MAGA world too much, that she has a lifestyle afterwards. Right now, she's chief of staff. It's a huge upgrade, but she's a ardent campaigner. She is a political operative who knows how to get people elected. And Trump seemed to defer to some of her judgment during that time when it was her arena. And now that he's in office, her opinion is, of course, important, but not necessarily as important as others or even Trump's own thoughts on any given matter. Is she then saying, okay, well, if I can't have an influence here, if I can't actually allow my politics or get my politics or my perspective on the table as often, maybe I need to, one, consider distancing myself because she's a little bit more traditional conservative Florida styles. Or maybe she's also saying, I need to make sure that I have a job afterward because this is what I love to do. I love to campaign, and I'm really, really good at it. She did say in a statement, she tweeted out, and it was on social media, she is on social media, and it says, quote, a disingenuously framed hit piece on me in the finest president, White House staff, and cabinet in history is how she described it. Quote, significant context was disregarded, and much of what I and others said about the team and the president was left out of the story, end quote. So she obviously is disavowing, or at least calling out, the Vanity Fair for not editing it in a way that is truthful, that leaves lots of context off the table, that is important to understand her comments. But I don't know if you necessarily need context to understand some of them. She outright calls out Donald Trump on the tariff situation, saying we tried to get him to loosen it. He's settling scores politically, which will not go well, which will not bode well for people like Letitia James, which will bode well for people like Letitia James and Comer, who their prosecution is going to be able to say, hey, look at this article. He's obviously doing this for political reasons rather than because they are inherently guilty. And all you have to do is plant a seed of doubt in those situations, in grand juries especially, but in eventual juries, if it was even to make it to if it was to make it to court, to make it to the final docket, and guess what? Nope. Most judges probably aren't going to let it go as it is. She mentions that Elon Musk is possibly doing drugs based on his own testimonials. Quote, he's an odd duck, as I think geniuses are. It's not helpful, but he's his own person. And she called him, quote, an avowed ketamine user. Now, once again, it's all based on his own statements, not necessarily her seeing him do anything, which is good to hear. That means he probably wasn't doing it when he was in or near the White House, and we're not going to have a Hunter Biden or mystery cocaine sort of dealio at the White House. Good to know, but it doesn't give any less credence to her statements, and I don't know. I have no idea whether he used ketamine. I really don't care, because he's not near the White House anymore. He's not a erratic actor who's actually influencing policy, so it's much less important now. Then again, keeping someone like that away, and it's not to say he doesn't have something to offer. There have been plenty of people who are geniuses, who have things to offer politically, who are weird, who do weird things, they have odd habits, but you don't necessarily want someone like erratic like that as from a political perspective in your administration, because guess what? It's going to come back to nip you in the butt. It's going to cause situations like this, which may not be good for publicity, that are going to cause erratic behavior, that may not be good for your end goal as an administration. So we'll see if that one bears any fruit. I bet Elon's already been out there absolutely saying no. But the most interesting part, in my opinion, because it does talk about the future of the Republican Party, is the 2028 background battle between Vance and Rubio. Quote, an important subtext of Ms. Wiles' comments, and remember, subtext rather than explicit, hear that part as well. Vanity Fair and New York Times are doing a little bit of reading and trying to get a little something extra out of the story. Quote, Ms. Wiles' comments is a quiet rivalry between Mr. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who are vying for Mr. Trump's nod to succeed him in 2028. The distinction she made between the two was seen as evidence that she is propping up Mr. Rubio, her fellow Floridian, over Mr. Vance, the more MAGA-friendly front-runner. And here's how she described both of them in their turn towards the Mr. Trump and MAGA movement. Quote, Marco was not the sort of person that would violate his principles, she said. He's just not. And so he had to get there. As for Mr. Vance, his conversion came when he was running for Senate. And I think his conversion was a little bit more sort of political, end quote. Now, does that inherently mean that she's right? Does that mean that she actually is propping him up? Is there actually a shadow battle, or is one of them already locked it in? I would guess if anybody had the ability to lock it in, and honestly, the FaceTime with the president, it would probably be Marco Rubio, given his Director of National Security and Secretary of State positions. He's going to be in front of Mr. Trump, Donald Trump, President Trump, all the time. He's going to be in there daily giving briefs. And Wiles, if she is enabling Rubio, she does see him as a successful follow-up and a potential winner. One, she's going to probably work that campaign, so she doesn't want to be too tied to MAGA, but also she could give Marco Rubio more time in front of the president, as she is the chief of staff, and she can't control necessarily Donald Trump. If he really wants something on a schedule, he'll get it on a schedule. But on the tacit day-to-day things, whereas the more simple interactions that she would be able to propagate and make part of his daily routine, it's probably those sort of things where she could schedule Marco Rubio to come in. So I know, once again, it seems like a little bit of Washington wishy-washy, but it's an interesting story nonetheless. It never does it feel as though you get so much insight from the top rung of the White House as to what's going on, and because she is willing to give unvarnished opinions, or at least opinions that seem to even be contrary to what the White House would want her to say in this situation, it feels more honest. Now, are people latching onto this because it's what they want to hear? The liberals and the people who are super MAGA, they're saying, look, they're not doing things the way that they need to be doing things. There's this going on. Traditional Republicans are probably saying, well, look at this, there's somebody inside fighting back, and the liberals are saying, oh, look, this is some drama, this is some tea that we can report on. Sure, there are plenty of other motives, reasons, and underlying understandings and perspectives that make this interesting to them. And also, like I said, it's just that nobody normally gets this much access. But I think, though she is disavowed, I still have a sneaking suspicion in my stomach that this is more of a move. And over the course of 11 months, it's difficult to say, because how much can you make a conscious decision and stick to it for those 11 interviews over the course of multiple months? That's a fair point, which is maybe she was just speaking candidly and these sort of things came out, and it's hard to keep a plan going that long, and to say that it's a concerted effort to clean her reputation, to distance herself, is maybe a little bit unfair. But there's still a small part of me that believes she's enough of a political operator to understand that her future is going to have to be beyond MAGA, because guess what? MAGA is Donald Trump. And when he's out of politics, he can't run again, which means she has to find the next candidate, or at least be willing and open to the next candidate. And that means she has to be appealing. But hey, that's just my opinion on the matter. If you have comments, thoughts, throw your comments down there in the comment section. Also down there, you can find the podcast on Spotify, Pocket Cast, Podvine, as well as the Twitter handle at your Daily Flip. It's right there below the like and subscribe button. You can also find the Twitter handle at your Daily Flip, where I post the links to these episodes on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and to the to the International 6 and 6 segment that comes out on Tuesday and Thursday. So with all that said, there's only one more thing to say. Stay safe. Don't die.